Joining me right now is Lord Tariq Ahmad. He is the Minister of State for International Affairs, particularly when it comes to South Asia, when it comes to Middle East, when it comes to the United Nations. Welcome. It's good to have you. And my first question, of course, the big foreign trade agreement. There has been a delegation from India that is right now in London. You have come over here. Has there been informal or formal chats thus far with regards to the foreign trade agreement, keeping in mind that we want to be in the last leg, elections taking place in both the countries, and should we see a culmination of it in the coming months or weeks perhaps?
Well, I think first of all, in answer to your question, the fact there is a team, as I speak, in London, looking at quite specific elements. We want an ambitious trade deal. India wants an ambitious trade deal, and it's demonstrable of the strength of the partnership between the two countries. And of course, it's no coincidence, the strength of the relationships underlined by the fact we've got a team working live as we speak, both teams in London. And of course, during my engagements that I'm having here, the issue of the FTA and the need to get it over the line is an extremely key priority. Now, I always say as a minister in a government, or indeed it applies to my Indian counterparts as well, if you need direction and inspiration, you look towards upwards. And I'm not just talking about God, but below God. You know, we all need divine inspiration, but our respective prime ministers, both Prime Minister Sunak and Prime Minister Modi, are very clear. They want a free trade deal between India and the United Kingdom. And I think if we need motivation at the moment, we have motivation enough. We need to ensure the officials work through the details on both sides, which are necessary. But I'm very hopeful that we will, through our direct relationship, through the direct engagement we're having, really move towards the culmination of a deal which works for both countries and, importantly, for businesses on both
Absolutely.
countries.
And therefore, like I said, elections are crucial. Is there a possibility that the deal can be signed before the elections? I'm keeping in mind the volatility in terms of the people's sentiment in London.
Well, I think, it'd be very easy to call a date and a timeline, but I'm going to leave that very much for our prime ministers of both countries. I think what's important for me as a minister responsible for our relationship with India, that we get a deal that really works, a deal that really delivers on goods and services, that really delivers in terms of inward investment for the UK businesses into India, but also something that works very well for Indians and for Indian businesses the other way, and indeed our people-to-people links. I'm confident we will get a good deal. I'm confident we will also be working hard in every sense, and that's demonstrable by the engagements we're having.
Right.
But I'm not going to give you a timeline you're going to hold me to, and you're saying I'm talking to a politician, he's giving me a timeline. But the nature of our engagement and the momentum we have currently built does demonstrate, I hope, to all your viewers about the urgency that both countries, indeed both prime ministers, are attaching to the FTA.
Absolutely. Looking at the Indian Ocean region, looking at how there has been volatility that has been seen, not just from the Middle Eastern side, not just from the Houthis attacks that have created a lot of chaos and concern across the globe, but also in terms of the Chinese aggression that is also being seen as a threat in the Indian Ocean region. There is Quad that has been created. There are key nations that are coming together, including US and including Japan and Australia. So in a situation such as this, how does UK stand in a cohesive organization, as a cohesive country, as a cohesive strategic partner for India to solve this very murky situation?
Well, India is a key strategic partner. It is a key friend for the United Kingdom. And I know those sentiments are shared by India. First of all, just unpacking your question somewhat, you're quite right. The issues of the Houthis, particularly in the Middle East, I'm also the Minister for the Middle East. What we've been very focused on, we've been very clear that the escalation of a crisis, or the attempt to escalate a crisis, which is already dire, the terrible and the shocking humanitarian suffering which is taking place in Gaza, the shocking events that took place on the 7th of October in Israel, putting those, and though we are prioritizing those very much, but what the Houthis are doing is impacting everyone. They're disrupting shipping lanes, they're attacking commercial vessels, and that's why the UK forces have been deployed quite directly there. It's not a proactive or an offensive measure, it's a defensive measure. And the only time the United Kingdom has conducted any operations in this respect is to protect both commercial shipping and indeed one of our ships sent there previously, HMS Diamond, was directly attacked, and we've given a proportionate response. Equally, I know India is engaging one of our commercial vehicles run by Trafigura. When that was actually attacked, we were very grateful as well that one of the first responders was the Indian vessel in the region, and that demonstrates the strong cooperation between both countries. Now, moving further afield, of course, we're aware of China's influence in the Indian Ocean and its activities in the Indian Ocean. For example, it carries out research. Ships are in the Indian Ocean, and that's why we have a very strong cooperation. We've seen carrier groups come here previously in 21. We have another carrier group from our Navy coming in 25. That demonstrably shows again, what does this mean? It means that we're not just working together, we're doing operations together. Indeed, being here at the Rasina Dialogue, I'm here together with our first Sea Lord. So he's engaging in meetings directly with Indian counterparts as I speak. So again, the relationship is a very strong one, but the security of India and the security of the United Kingdom and the wider alliances are very much intertwined.
Talking about Europe and talking about especially the Ukraine conflict that has gone on for 2 years now, how do you view India's stance with regards to the traditional partner that Russia has been, with regards to oil imports that India continues to make? There was the Munich conference that was taking place, and our External Affairs Minister spoke about how India needs to move smart when it comes to its trade negotiations and associations. And he was pointing particularly at the cheaper oil deals that it has been able to get from Russia. How does UK view all this?
Well, first of all, in terms of the Ukrainian war, let's be very clear. Why did it start? There was a P5, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, namely Russia, that committed not just an act of aggression. We'd already seen some of its actions through the annexation of Crimea. And since 2015, actually, the United Kingdom has been a strong supporter of Ukraine. And the illegal annexation of Crimea is also something that we've called for to be reversed. That said, what we're seeing in the Donbass, in the eastern part of Ukraine, is shocking. You know, I remember visiting Ukraine just in advance of the conflict beginning, and to see that a country that was moving forward progressively has been attacked quite directly by its neighbor, and a neighbor who regards that somehow might is right. Well, we live in 2024, and what the response has been is a strong response from NATO, an alliance that the United Kingdom is very much part of, but also directly the UK has stood with Ukraine, both in terms of military and economic support, but also to the incredible number of civilians who have been directly impacted, whose lives have been devastated because of Russia's aggression. Now, when you mention about India's relationship, we fully understand that India has a strong historic relationship with Russia since its independence. But equally, we talk to many countries, including India, about the importance of ensuring that we do really get that messaging across to Russia, that such kind of aggressive wars which you can engage on, if they're not curtailed, it sends a green light to other aggressors as well. Tomorrow it may be someone else. So we have to stand united. And in this respect, I point to the work the United Kingdom and other countries have done in the UN. And let's look in the context of the UN General Assembly. Consistently over the last 2 years, whenever there's been votes, there's been 4 or 5 votes. 140 countries of the 193 in the UN have voted consistently in support of Ukraine's position. And even those, such as India, that have abstained, have not sided with Russia. They've chosen to abstain. And that's sending a very strong diplomatic message about the importance of sovereignty of Ukraine, which I know India and indeed Foreign Minister Jaishankar fully supports.
At this point of time, a lot of critics of the Ukraine-Russia war talking about how Ukraine has become a scapegoat and it is losing out in terms of the war, in terms of the casualties and fatalities, with regards to the trade sanctions that continue to be imposed on Russia, and therefore, a lot of goods, services not reaching Ukraine and not reaching the rest of Europe. There are a number of European countries and their ambassadors who speak about how this war is not in favor of Europe, but a war that is being carried forward by United States of America and other NATO allies.
Well, you don't need to go further than hearing what President Zelensky, this is a fight by Ukraine, for Ukraine. And as allies and friends of Ukraine, we stand with Ukraine. Ask any Ukrainian who's been subjected to the warmongering that has been pushed onto them by Russia. They want their lives back, they want their homes back. They want to start and reliving their lives as they did across Ukraine. And that's the principles that we're fighting for. There is a peace plan being offered by President Zelensky, the 10-point peace plan. It's for Russia to respond actively to that. And this thing about it just being a European war, if I may just say, prior to the war, Ukraine provided, it was the breadbasket, not just of Europe, to the world. There were 400 million, just shy of 500 million people in the world that benefited from grain from Ukraine. And that's why we were very supportive of the UN efforts when they started their Black Sea Grain Initiative. And it's not just about Europe, it's not just one or two countries. When you look towards Africa, vast amounts of Africa, especially North Africa, countries like Egypt, were directly impacted because of the direct attacks of Russia on Ukraine's ability to export grain. Indeed, they've even gone as far as taking some of the warehouses where that grain was held and attacking them. But working with allies, working as well, and I praise the efforts of the UN and the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which Russia has now rejected, but we're still operating, and Turkey has played a very important role. So I think we need to recognize who is the aggressor, who is the victim. Ukraine is the victim, its people are the victims, and Russia is the aggressor. This could end now. Russia could end this war today as we speak by stopping its aggression and pulling back from the sovereign territory of Ukraine. So it's very much on Russia to act, and act now, because the harm is not just on ordinary Russian civilians who are paying a heavy price for what Mr. Putin is doing, or on the Ukrainians, or indeed on Europe. This is a global challenge. It's had a global impact, much akin to when we were talking about the Houthis and the need for navigation through the Red Sea. This is impacting you and I. It's impacting an ordinary citizen across the world in terms of an economic detrimental influence on how they go about their daily lives, their bread being denied or basic goods not being able to be shipped.
Okay.
So we need to come together and ensure that we stand up against the aggressor.
Okay, the point that, countries that are neighboring Ukraine, we talk about Germany and particularly what's happening in Poland right now. On the borders, the Polish farmers have come out with their tractors and they are stopping the food supply that is coming in from Ukraine because it's impacting their livelihood, because the food grains are cheaper in Ukraine at this point of time, and they are sending it in hordes in all these countries. So the point again I'm asking is, who's going to blink first, whether it is about the Ukraine-Russia war or we talk about the Israel-Gaza Strip conflict that we are facing?
Well, I mean, first of all, just to be clear, Poland have played an incredible role. I've visited Poland, I've seen the incredible support. We're talking 1 million plus people from Ukraine who are now residing in Poland. Poland have made all provisions for them. We have the State Secretary of Poland here at the Racina Dialogue, and they continue to do so. They were the first country to provide tanks to Ukraine in their defense of their sovereign territory. And of course there will be people within Poland, like any country, that are concerned, but it's something that I know the Polish government are very much seized of. And the generosity of the Polish people is very clear in terms of how they've literally opened up their homes. I was on a panel earlier today where he said it was the people who first opened up their homes, then it was the regional governments, then the federal government. So the generosity of the Polish people is clear. In terms of who blinks, Russia can stop this now. What we're seeing in Israel and Gaza is shocking. Yes, the abhorrent acts of terrorism on the 7th of October, but what we're seeing now is a unleashing of a real suffering, a humanitarian catastrophe on the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza. And that's why the United Kingdom's been very clear. What we need now is a stop to the fighting right now. We need to ensure that that sustainable ceasefire that the Foreign Secretary has articulated happens. But it doesn't end there. If we're going to end this conflict, which is 70 years plus, it ultimately must result in that political horizon, that hope for Palestinians, that of the creation of two states and a sovereign state of Palestine. And the UK, along with other partners, including the US, is working directly with Israel and the Palestinians in pursuit of that aim. It's challenging, it's difficult, it's probably the most testing time I've ever had as a minister, but we're also working with the Gulf states and their partners to ensure whether it's a stop in the fighting now, the sustainable ceasefire, the reconstruction plans, the two-state horizon, and yes, renewing Palestinian leadership. So you have governance across Gaza and West Bank leading to the creation of a Palestinian state. We're seized of it. There's a small window of opportunity, and it's not just for the United Kingdom. It's not just for India or anyone. It's collectively on all of us. Wars ultimately impact civilians the most, whether we're talking of the war in Ukraine or the situation and the current war on Gaza, and for all those lives that have been lost, we owe it to them. And my job as a minister in government, we owe it to them to do our part, leave no stone unturned, to ensure the ultimate prize, the ultimate goal must be peace.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lord Tariq, for joining me, for speaking with me. I would have carried on with this question answer session because there's a lot of intriguing messages that you bring forth from the UK point of view, and of course you cover a large expanse when it comes to Middle East, which is at this point of time in the middle of a massive conflict which is impacting particularly the world, and obviously India's perspective on it and UK's perspective. So thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.